From the nonpartisan Maddy Institute and the California channel at the state capitol, this is a Maddy Policy Brief.
Welcome. California legislature enjoys a relatively high approval rating, much higher, frankly, than the U.S. Congress. It wasn't always so. In 2010, the PPIC statewide survey reported a record low 14% approval rating for the California legislature. By 2016, however, that number had risen to 45%. What's happening? Our guest is going to tell us. He is Eric McGee, a research fellow with the Nonpartisan Public Policy Institute of California. Welcome to the Maddy Report.
Thanks for having me.
So how do you explain this rebound in the approval rating?
Well, I think it's probably a couple things. One of the biggest factors is the rebounding economy. The approval of the legislature and the feelings about the economy move pretty well in lockstep. I think in addition to that, there's also in more recent years less conflict in the legislature. There was in the late 2000s, there was a tremendous amount of conflict over the budget.
Never getting done on time.
Never getting done on time. It was international news how late it was. And that doesn't happen anymore. And I think there is that's partly due to changing the threshold for passing the budget to make it easier to pass. But also to some of these reforms, other reforms, a new primary system, a new redistricting system that have maybe smudged legislators together a little bit more on either side of the aisle than they used to be.
A few more moderates maybe
few more moderates,
had in the past. But you know, that does not to say that there isn't a deep partisan divide in California. Indeed, your report, you say that the California legislature is, quote, uniquely polarized, unquote. What led you to that conclusion?
There's some good data out there now on where legislators in the entire country stand that allows us to put California in the context of the rest of the country. I think we've always known, just sort of more anecdotally, but also with other kinds of measures, we've known California by itself, looking at the legislature, there was a big divide. But it turns out that divide is quite large relative to the rest of the country. There's a lot of other legislatures where Democrats and Republicans continue to overlap, believe it or not. And it's really California stands out on one end of that extreme.
I was reading your report and you were saying the median Republican, whatever that is, and the median Democrat are further divided in California than when you look at other states of those, some kind of the average Republican, average Democrat, which is really interesting. You know, for decades now, a while, California's been controlled by the Democratic Party. You know, at the state level, the governor and those type of statewide elections, the legislature, either 2/3 supermajority or just a large number of Democrats in the legislature. Is that going to continue for the foreseeable future?
I think so, yeah. If you look at the trends in party registration, I think in this latest registration report that just came out last month, Republicans are just a smidge ahead of no party preference registrants. And I fully expect in the next few years that those will flip and the no party preference registrants will actually exceed Republicans. Republicans are on a downhill slide lately, and if you look at the way that the youngest registrants are registering, there's no sign in the immediate future that that's going to quit, right?
Yeah,
so,
those are the quote-unquote independent voters, which is sometimes confusing because there actually is like an American Independent Party, which is actually not independent. It's actually very
different,
very conservative.
Yes.
So people get confused sometimes, but these are people who are not declaring any party, no party preference. So why are fewer people registering for the major parties?
Well, so I think the first thing is that they aren't, in the last maybe decade to a decade and a half, they haven't. The Democratic Party has actually maintained its registration as sort of a flat line, right? It hasn't lost or gained. The real shift recently has been Republicans declining and no party preference increasing. But there has been a much longer term trend of no party preference registrants going back to the 1960s of a growth in that category. There's a variety of reasons. I think people like that sense of sort of independence and distance from the parties. But it's important to remember that about 2/3 of these people who call themselves independents and register that way really lean pretty strongly toward one party or the other and will vote accordingly.
Yeah, and it sounds like what I'm thinking reading your report said most of those declined to state are trending to vote for Democrats.
Yeah, in California, it kind of depends on the part of the state, and it also depends if you look nationally. It depends on the state you're looking at nationally. But the independents do tend to favor one part or the other. In California, they favor the Democrats.
Okay, so let's talk about voter turnout, which is pretty anemic in California. Is this happening just in California, or is it a kind of a nationwide trend?
So if you break it into a question of sort of turning out once you're already registered to vote versus registering to vote in the first place, California stands out in the terms of the registration. So our registration rate is actually falling relative to the registration rates in states nationwide. In terms of turnout, our midterm turnout, that is the year when we elect our governor and when there's no president on the ballot, that midterm turnout has been declining in California, but it's also been declining in other states. So the thing that makes California a little unique is its registration rate, which has been dropping compared to other states.
So let's kind of add all this up. So we got a little bit of legislative polarization. We have an increase in independent voters in California. We have low voter turnout. How is it likely to affect California moving forward?
Well, so I think we're kind of in this unique inflection point in California where the Democratic Party has really reached a level of dominance that is unusual in the broader history of the state, and I think it puts us in a position where we need to think a little bit less about sort of who's controlling what and more how do we make sure that the Democratic Party is accountable, because there are risks that come with that level of dominance. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but we want to make sure that we're sort of holding them accountable as they sort of take complete control of government.
Yeah, and it's also maybe looking more at the local level for decision making. So
yeah, and I think that's going to be an important thing moving forward too. I think there are some steps in that direction already that have been taken under Brown, and I think that's probably a healthy way to go.
All right. Well, I want to thank Eric McGee from the Public Policy Institute of California for joining us. It looks like California's political landscape will continue to change.
For a more in-depth analysis of this and other public policy issues important to Californians, please log on to our website at maddyinstitute.org and click on the Policy Analysis tab.